Thanks for joining us this Monday evening. I'm Alex Bell, and this is To the Point, where we're bringing you more context and more information on issues impacting us here in Northern California. So let's get right to tonight's main point. Today marks week 9 of a strike by Kaiser Permanente mental health care providers, and we've been following this story since the beginning. Those on strike say it's not about the money, but about the time they have to provide quality care to their patients. But Kaiser says that the union's demands would mean fewer appointments. Becca Habegger shows us what's at the heart of all of this.
When therapists are under attack, what do we do? Stand up, fight back!
Jenny Butera is one of about 2,000 psychologists, social workers, therapists, and chemical dependency counselors in Kaiser's Northern California region, represented by the National Union of Healthcare Workers. Since August 15th, hundreds of these providers have been on strike, demanding 3 main things they say will lead to better patient care. A caseload cap. Currently, they say there's no limit on how many patients a provider can have at one time, and the union calls caseloads unmanageable. More returning patient appointments and fewer new patient appointments to have more availability for existing patients, and more time for indirect patient care. That's the time a provider spends outside of seeing patients.
Indirect care is actually tasks that we need to do to provide for the patient. Oftentimes that might be calling the sheriff for a welfare check, doing a 5150 on a suicidal patient, contacting CPS for reporting a child abuse case. So a lot of things that are only possible if you're a licensed therapist.
Plus replying to patient emails and creating treatment plans, the union says. But Kaiser Permanente says they've met the union halfway at the bargaining table on indirect care time, only to have their offers rejected. The union's excessive demand would reduce the number of appointments we currently have by more than 2,500 every week, Kaiser Permanente tells ABC 10. This takes us in the wrong direction at a time when the need for mental health care has never been higher. Kaiser Permanente has been clear we're not willing to do that. We have extended all that we can without jeopardizing the care we bring to patients. In terms of caseload, Kaiser says our therapists in adult and child mental health clinics who provide individual psychotherapy see an average of 5 to 7 patients per day. In addition, we have an administrative structure in place to ensure an appropriate amount of preparation time and time to support ongoing education. Butera says it's about quality over quantity.
Patients are suffering. They will continue to suffer with our current caseload and our current schedule, the way it's made up.
Also at the heart of this is a law called SB 221, which went into effect in July. It aims to strengthen Californians' timely access to mental health care by requiring healthcare service plans, including Kaiser Permanente and health insurers, to provide follow-up mental health and substance use disorder therapy appointments within 10 business days, unless the therapist decides the patient can wait longer.
Not all patients need that time or need that frequent of a session, but many do, and we just can't get them in. So we're waiting. Some therapists have some availability in 4 weeks. I certainly don't. My earliest is typically 6 to 8 weeks out.
The union claims Kaiser is violating SB 221, especially with hundreds of providers still out on strike. Kaiser Permanente responded to that, telling ABC 10 the new law aligns with Kaiser Permanente's long-standing commitment to provide timely, high-quality mental health care and substance use disorder treatment to our members. The implementation of SB 221 is challenging for all health plans and providers, not just Kaiser Permanente, given the overall demand for mental health care and substance use disorder services and the documented shortage of trained professionals both nationally and in California. Implementation of SB 221 to Kaiser Permanente's model of mental health and addiction care and services is well underway.
The 10-day rule seems to be pretty reasonable.
We reached out to Richard Frank, a senior fellow in economic studies with the Brookings Institution and director of the USC Brookings Schaefer Initiative on Health Policy. He says the aim of SB 221 is a good one, trying to make mental health care as accessible as physical health care.
And what we're really interested in is making sure that people can get quality mental health and substance use disorder services when they need it, at a reasonable point.
And Becca's with us right now. Becca, I think my first question is, how many people is this directly affecting?
Yeah, this is hard to quantify because at this point, Kaiser is working with patients, it says, to help connect them with providers who, if their providers on strike, they do have community contracted providers. But Kaiser also says 65% of the providers who initially went on strike are back in August have since returned to work. On the other hand, the union says patients are affected by, having to wait weeks to schedule a follow-up appointment with their provider. And they said this was an issue even before the strike happened. The union says that.
The union says this was an issue before the strike.
Yeah, the union says this was an issue. These long wait times were an issue before the strike. It's just that now SB 221 is that law that went into effect July 1st of this year, which makes extending follow-up appointments beyond 10 business days in violation of the law. So, that is the law of the land right now. These follow-up appointments have to come within 10 business days. The union says Kaiser is violating that. Kaiser says they are working to implement SB 221 and that they have a network of community-based providers. So they say they are not in violation of the law per se.
And Kaiser also mentioned a provider shortage. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. Studies have shown that California has a shortage of mental health care providers, but how acutely it's felt really depends on where in the state you live. Generally, urban areas are better serviced. Rural areas have a tougher time. The union, however, says it's not about a provider shortage. It's about work conditions. They say providers don't want to work for Kaiser because of the conditions that I laid out in the story. Kaiser, on the other hand, says it really comes down to a provider shortage, and they're working with the union to try to come to an agreement. At this point, though, as you've seen, they have been on a strike for 9 weeks now, and it looks like an agreement isn't quite yet in sight.
All right, Becca, thank you. And we've also been hearing from you at home on this issue, and Becca's going to be sticking around because when we come back, we'll share some of what Kaiser patients who wrote into us had to say about this issue. All right, now before the break, we went in depth into the mental health worker strike at Kaiser that's now entering its 9th week. Today is World Mental Health Day, and we wanted to know if you at home have had trouble accessing mental health care. Now, Becca, you've been covering this for a while now. I want to read some of the viewer comments that people wrote into us. We have Chris Sean. She said that you can do an intake appointment with Kaiser, and the next available appointment isn't for about 4 to 6 weeks. If you get an outside referral, you can be seen almost as soon as the next day as your authorization. Authorization can almost take about a week as well, she adds. And then another person told us that they're with Dignity Health in Sacramento using a purchased health insurance plan. They also say that they've called 8 to 10 therapists who are in network, and only one of them, Becca, one of them was accepting patients. So that person said, quote, "It's shocking how rationed mental health care is." You've been covering this. What do you make of those comments?
Yeah, and at first I think it's important to point out that we reached out on a side note to both of those people just to say, hey, was this your personal experience? Do you work for Kaiser? Is this something that you heard from a friend secondhand? Both of these individuals told us that it's a personal experience with Kaiser, and that second person said it was also their experience at Kaiser and at
Dignity.
Yeah, that they had long wait times. Look, my impression of this is that it really squares with what we're hearing from both sides. The union at Kaiser, who's representing the mental health care workers, they say there are long waits, 4 to 6 weeks to get either an initial appointment or a follow-up appointment. They say that's an unacceptable wait time to get mental health care. On the other hand, we are hearing from Kaiser Permanente that they have this list of community-based providers that they can give to people. People are able to reach out on their own and say, hey.
But reach out on their own.
Reach out on their own and say, hey, are you taking new patients? Or, hey, can I get a follow-up appointment if it's someone that they've seen before? So in this case, it depends on your opinion on this. Do you want to do the work to reach out to find someone? Do you think that your insurer, your HMO should be doing this for you? So again, both sides have their positions saying that they're doing what they can, but the union maintains that 4 to 6 weeks is an unacceptable amount of time to wait for a follow-up appointment. And that's what these folks, these commenters are telling us.
All right, Becca, thank you. Keep writing into us. We want to hear from you. And World Mental Health Day was made to raise awareness of mental health issues and make them a global priority. Now, a poll from CNN and the Kaiser Family Foundation found that 90% of adults think that there's a mental health crisis in our country. Locally in Sacramento and Yolo counties, there are 3 numbers that you can dial right now to be connected to mental health resources. 211 is a free confidential information and referral service that is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. All right, and we are just 28 days away from this November election. Ballots have now been mailed, and we're looking at what's at stake. Okay, we are 28 days away from Election Day. Ballots are now in the mail for this year's midterm elections, and today was the last day for counties in California to send them out. So what's at stake this year? Well, Republicans are going all in on crime and homelessness, and then Democrats are focusing on abortion and climate change. In California, Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1. But political reporter Morgan Reiner spoke with the California GOP chairwoman who says it's going to be the issues that will really flip seats red this year. She says the party is branching out to areas that they've historically left out. The California GOP just opened their first information center in Little Saigon in Orange County, and then 2 more Latino centers.
There have been many communities around our state that we have just ceded to the Democrats. We haven't shown up, we hadn't engaged, and we'd neglected them. And so making sure that we're showing up, listening, talking to people about what their issues are, and come to find there's so much more that we agree on than we disagree on.
Now, Patterson says the party is focusing on 5 congressional seats that they hope to flip red. On the national level, Republicans only need to win 5 seats across the country to take back the House. And the governor's opponent, Republican Brian Dahle, said to us in simple terms, if you don't like the way things are going right now in California, give him a shot. But also remember, there are twice as many Democrats than Republicans in California. Governor Newsom told us that he takes nothing for granted, and even though the polls are projected that he will be winning.
Been all over the state of California. We have focused on the issues that people care about. And $9.5 billion of relief checks to address the biggest anxiety people have, and that's issues of inflation, cost of groceries and gas. Couldn't be more proud of the CARE Court getting passed. It was a big deal. Put a tremendous amount of political capital on that. The climate package, second to none.
Now, of course, we cannot ignore the elephant in the room this election cycle. You might have seen these ads on our channel. Take a look.
Go directly to getting people off the streets and into housing.
So these are ads for and against Proposition 26 and 27. Prop 26 could legalize sports betting in tribal casinos. Prop 27 could legalize sports betting online. And these are said to be the most expensive ballot measures in state history. Why is that? Well, to get to the point, these propositions, which hope to legalize sports betting, are about business. Native American tribes are battling gambling companies for control over what could be another multi-billion-dollar industry. Now, back in 1987, a California tribe won a U.S. Supreme Court case that if the state allows any sort of gambling, at the time it was bingo parlors, then tribes were allowed to have it on their land too. Other state propositions have allowed tribes to expand casinos. California veteran journalist Dan Walters has reported on these efforts.
They made money and they built better facilities. Within a few years, we're kind of expanding the definition of the court's permission and started putting in a form of slot machine. State authorities said they were illegal, but they fought over it, continued to have the slot machines, and finally made enough money on the slots, financed some ballot measures in California that gave them a monopoly over almost full casino gambling in California.
Now, join us here on To The Point this Thursday. We are going to dive deep into those propositions and the arguments for and against them. ABC 10 political reporter Morgan Reiner will also join us to break all of it down. And again, that's Thursday right here on To The Point. But I also want to know what you're thinking. Where do you stand this election cycle? Over the next few weeks, we are coming straight to you because we have a lot of questions. So we want to know, what matters most to you? What do you need to make the election process easier? We want to hear from you, so we will be at a few locations around town. So take a look at your screen. Here's what we got coming up on the 14th and 15th. We want to get you all of those resources that you need to vote. And if you can't attend, don't worry. You can always text us any questions you have at 916-321-3310. Or you already know you can head to abc10.com/politics. And it's time to start strategizing how you'll be taking care of your yards because Sacramento water rules are about to get a lot stricter come November. The city's current rules allow for 2 days of watering a week, but starting on November 1st, you'll be limited to watering your lawn or landscaping just in general to just 1 day during the weekend. So take a look at this. You will only be able to water on Saturday or Sunday, but the time of day does not matter. Watering is not allowed until 48 hours after it rains 1/8 of an inch or more. And there are exceptions. You can find those on our website, again, abc10.com/to-the-point. And also take note, water waste fines are doubling, ranging from $50 to $1,000, depending on how many times you violated. All right, speaking of all that water, we are a little over a week into California's new water year, and the outlook isn't stunning at this point. We're slowly entering the Northern California wet season, but the current larger scale weather patterns like La Nina means that we could be in for a dry winter, but it does go much deeper than that. Here's Brenda Minchef.
You have kind of a train wreck of dryness producing influences for sure.
Those were the words of meteorologist Robert Henson when talking about this persistent dry pattern over the western United States. But it isn't just the fact that we haven't had rain, it's that the atmosphere is in several different ways hurting a wet pattern from developing on the west coast.
Not only in California, but across the United States and many parts of the world, El Nino has a substantial role in predicting rainfall during the northern winter, which of course is the wet season in California. I mean, certainly overall, and so is the big enchilada.
Of course, there's more than El Nino La Nina. For example, there's also what's known as the Pacific Decadal Oscillation.
The PDO, Pacific Decadal Oscillation, you can think of it kind of like a longer term El Nino Southern Oscillation. It's kind of a way of looking at the aggregated effects that we think of as associated with El Nino, La Nina.
Another one that is really impacting us right now is the Pacific North American Oscillation, or PNA. It's in its positive phase right now, where high pressure persistently lingers over the west coast, blocking approaching storms.
I see the PNA as kind of a descriptor as much as anything. It's not like something like El Nino, La Nina, where it sets in and you pretty much know it's going to be in place for most of the winter into the spring.
There are signs some of these patterns might change this winter, and no one of these things means it's a foregone conclusion that we're in for a dry winter. It just means that the overall pattern makes it less likely for storm after storm to hit California.
And Brendan Minchef is here with me now. Brendan, I feel like a lot of people are wondering, how much rain do we need to declare ourselves out of a drought?
Yeah, and that's a good question, and I don't have an exact number for that. I'm not sure there is an exact number, but we do know that it's going to take a lot of atmospheric rivers. It's going to take a lot of wintertime storms, storm after storm, really spaced out over the course of a winter. You know, we don't want it all at once. That's too much to handle. We really need it, you know, a little bit in October, a little bit in November, maybe a little more December, January, and really set us off onto a good start into the summer months.
And before we go, could we see these patterns shift more to wet conditions or dry conditions?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we're already starting to see potentially this La Nina maybe is going to go a little more neutral or more El Nino by the time we get to spring or summer of next year. But some of these, like the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, literally can take 20 to 25 years to change into a new phase or a new state. The PNA with that high pressure, that is more of a weekly to bi-weekly kind of pattern. So these things do change, but right now they're stacked against us.
All right, Brendan, thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Let's take a look outside at your Gilmore backyard here. Another beautiful day, still warm. I wish we were seeing those fall temperatures, but we're not quite yet. Sacramento is seeing 86, and here's your 10-day forecast. Today is Indigenous Peoples Day, and we're celebrating Marine Colonel Nicole Mann, who recently arrived to the International Space Station for a 5-month stay. So she became the first Native American woman to go to space just last Thursday. Nicole is a member of the Wulaiki of the Round Valley Indian tribes in Northern California. She was mission commander of the SpaceX Dragon that took her crew up to the ISS. And she says that she took with her her wedding ring, a few charms, and also a dream catcher from her mother. All right, that's all we have for you tonight. We'll see you tomorrow.